Transformez-moi! Hey all, how do you like my Miraculous OC? I'd like to thank Countess Rose for making it for me nearly 2 years ago. Much like many of my video ideas, I let this one sit by the wayside. But determined to get something on my channel, and inspired both by the phenomenon that was Oblivio and Antonace's procrastination challenge, I've decided to start from scratch and review Miraculous Ladybug. I won't be reviewing Oblivio or Cat Blanc itself quite yet, however, as I wanted to start by reviewing Season 1 as a whole first, probably covering future seasons later on. Possibly. You know how my motivation is. No time to waste, since I already wasted most of it. On to the review! So Miraculous Ladybug is a 3D animated magical girl anime. Sort of. Purists will say that it's not an anime as it's developed in France and even takes place in Paris, but for formatting and even some trope purposes, it is an anime formatted show. And don't let the 3D animated bit throw you off. I know 3D anime typically looks less than appealing most of the time. I'm looking at you, Ruby! But this show is actually quite well animated. Now, in this review, I want to emphasize something all reviewers should be emphasizing, but seldom do. Do you recommend this to others, and why? If asked this question in regards to Miraculous Ladybug, I would give my own follow-up question. Are you shipping trash? If the answer is yes, then my answer is, for the love of all things holy, yes, watch this show, you'll love it! I'll fully admit that's how my friend got me to watch it and fall in love with the show. If the answer is no, I would still recommend the show, but a little more reluctantly. You see, the shipping is the best part of the show, and I can't be certain how well the other factors of the show stand up scrutiny without it. So let's start with the main selling factor here. The shipping. Oh, the shipping. Now, there are a couple of other, couples in the show besides the main one, so you do have some variety, but let's be fair, we're all here to see the main duo get together. Now, what makes this dynamic so interesting is the love square it makes. The basis of the romance is they love each other, but oh, if only they knew each other's secret identity, then they would be able to get together! Now, unlike shows like Sailor Moon that have them in love in one form but hate each other in another form, Miraculous Ladybug makes things far more complicated, and thus interesting. So our heroine Marinette, who is also Ladybug, is in love with Adrien. Little does she know that Adrien is also Cat Noir, who is in turn in love with Ladybug without knowing that she's his classmate Marinette. This leads to two characters who can have 4 different interactions. Cat Noir and Marinette, who have a very casual interaction. Marinette bumbling over Adrien when he sees her as little more than a classmate. Yes, I know the friendship between the civilian forms becomes more defined as the seasons progress, but in the first season they weren't even really friends. Not in a close sense, anyway. Then there's Cat Noir and Ladybug, the close team and dynamic duo. Now, Cat Noir flirts non-stop with Ladybug, but she just sort of assumes he's being, well, French. Despite Cat being far from subtle, she doesn't get the hint that it's from a genuine place of love. Then there's Ladybug and Adrien, and oh my gosh, can you cut the sexual tension with a knife? And this is why this show is so intriguing in the romance department. You basically get 4 ships for the price of 1! All the OTP! Now, like I said, there are other factors that make the show enjoyable, so let's dissect those a little bit too. For instance, do you like puns? If you like puns, like another prominent shipper in the community I know, you'll probably enjoy a good chunk of Cat Noir's dialogue. If you don't, that may be a knock against the show for you. But I personally never got bothered by the puns. Mostly because if they got really bad, even the rest of the cast would facepalm. There's just something about shared suffering that makes it easier on the senses. Another thing I really like about the show is the general setup of the powers and how they work. In a lot of other magical girl shows, it's all, oh no, they're being controlled by the evil, totally not a neglectful father in disguise. Time to wish them back to sense with magical friendship beams. Yes, there is mind control, but there is a limit to it in the sense that the villain can only manipulate the minds of those who are emotionally compromised. This gives a nice little lesson that if you are consumed by sadness or anger, you are much more easily to be controlled by those with malicious intent. But the most important subversion of the usual magical girl trope is the use of Ladybug's brain. What I love about this show is that it's not just about hope and love making everything better. She actually has to use her wits to figure things out. Don't get me wrong, the compassion angle is why I love shows like Sailor Moon and My Little Pony, but I just love changing it up with a little brain power too. What I mean by this is that when Ladybug uses her powers, all she gets is a singular item, like a towel, and she has to figure out how to use that to MacGyver her way to a solution within 5 minutes before she turns back into her civilian form. So there's a ticking clock element to it as well. But if you're missing the compassion angle, don't worry, it comes up too. Sometimes the person comes right back to their senses once the magic is gone, but sometimes Ladybug has to give them another pep talk afterwards. Another angle about her powers that I love and probably only means anything to me is the use of Miraculous Ladybug to make everything right again. This gives the perfect balance of high suspense without long-term damage. What I mean by that is you could have very massively dangerous things like the freaking Eiffel Tower come crashing down and the horror that might cause for the citizens of Paris, and that being a very tense situation, without you also having to worry about the poor janitor that has to clean up after these huge superhero fights. Maybe this is something that only bothers me, but I hate seeing big old destruction movies because I can't turn off the part of my brain that thinks about the poor people who have to clean up after all this. But if one leaves out the possibility of massive damage, a lot of tension goes away too. And this show found the perfect balance of high-stakes destruction and cleaning up after your own messes. This pleases me greatly, even if it doesn't matter much to anybody else. Another part of the show I thoroughly enjoy is the character designs, particularly of the villains. Sometimes. It's kind of hit and miss. Sometimes you'll get a design that's phenomenal, and other times it's not. At some point in the first season, all of Marinette's classmates get turned into an evil villain or akumatized, and it's interesting to see the forms each of them take, for better or worse. Something I should mention before throwing you into the show is the episode order, or rather the lack thereof. There's no real way to watch the first season with it making complete sense. What I mean is that, at times, they'll refer to something in one episode that technically doesn't happen until the next episode. And no, it doesn't matter if you watch it in the French order or the American order, the continuity is still a muddled mess. They did use this to their advantage, though, as the season finale is, technically speaking, the origin story. You sort of jump into the season with the setup already in place, and it's only after you've gotten to know each of the characters so well that you finally get an answer to the question of how they all got together in the first place. Now, you may have noticed I have been slowly inching towards the aspects of the show that aren't so great, so let's focus on the elephant in the room in that regard. Chloe Bourgeois, the clear weak link of the first season. Yes, I know she gets more development in later seasons, but in the first season she's just a bland, rich, mean girl and everything that trope encompasses with no originality of her own. If a character can be summed up by her last name, then there really isn't anything going for her. But speaking of last names, let's flip back and talk about a couple of points that I find especially interesting, particularly Miss Marinette Dupin-Chang, the daughter of a French baker and a Chinese woman. Yes, you heard me right, a mixed-racial superheroine. We just do not get enough of those. But they don't make a big deal of this. In fact, they barely mention it. Another interesting angle that you might miss if you don't spend hours picking apart aspects of a cartoon show like I do is the concept of good and bad luck and misconceptions. Ladybugs are symbols of good luck, and black cats of bad luck. If you were to look at the characters from the angle of their social lives, you might think the roles are reversed. Adrian is rich, handsome, popular, and famous. Clearly a very lucky person who would not fit into the bad luck of the black cat at all. And then you have Marinette, who is clumsy, awkward, and oftentimes the butt of her classmates' jokes, especially Chloe's. So you might see her as the unlucky one, and she even describes herself as such. You may think she's an ill match for the Ladybug, which does save her from people figuring out her identity. But in truth, in things that matter, Marinette is the lucky one. Marinette has two very loving parents and many devoted friends. She's a talented seamstress who does all she can for people around her. She is truly lucky. Adrian, on the other hand, has a father who is both overly controlling and neglectful, and a mother who is MIA. Since he's been so secluded his whole life, he barely understands how to make friends at first, and is often forced to let people down because of all of the obligations he has to his father and his career as a model. That sounds like the perfect fit for the Black Cat to me. All in all, it's up to you if you give the show a watch, but if any of those concepts seem interesting to you, I'd give it a look. Especially if you're a shipper. Like, comment, subscribe, do your YouTube thing, and if you're very lucky, I might see you later. Bye-bye, little butterflies.